It is now 6:30, calling to order Trophy Club Mud 1. We have a quorum. All 5 directors are present. Okay, citizen comments. This is an opportunity for citizens to address the board on any matter, whether or not it's posted on the agenda. The board is not permitted to take action on or discuss any comments made to the board at this time concerning an item not listed on the agenda. The board will hear comments on specific agenda items prior to the board addressing those items. You may speak up to 4 minutes or the time limit determined by the president or presiding officer. To speak during this term, you must complete the speaker's form that includes the topic of your statement. Citizens' comments should be limited to matters over which the board has authority. Are there any citizens' comments?
No.
Hearing that there are none, we'll proceed to the consent agenda. All matters listed as consent agenda are considered to be routine by the board of directors and will be enacted by one motion. There will not be a separate discussion of these items. If discussion is desired, that item will be removed from the consent agenda and will be considered separately. Item number 1, consider and take appropriate action to approve the consent agenda. December 2018 check register. B, December 17th regular meeting minutes. C, quarterly investment report, first quarter FY 2019. And D, tax collection report, first quarter fiscal year 2019. Would anyone like to remove any item from the consent agenda?
I would like to remove item B.
Okay, Vice President Rose would like to remove item B, the December 17th, 2018 regular meeting minutes. Any others? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion for 1A, C, and D of the consent agenda.
I move that we approve the consent agenda items 1A, 1C, 1D.
Have a motion by Director Chapman to approve consent agendas item 1A, C, and D. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
It's seconded by Director Castanway. All in favor indicate by raising your hand.
I had a question. Why, can we talk about why we're removing B afterwards?
But we can talk about it afterwards.
Okay,
Yeah.
fine, I agree.
Okay, motion passes unanimously. Let's go to 1B. Vice President Rose?
Okay, if you will go to page 11 of your packet and look at the motion on item 4, when you get there. The president made a motion, and the tape indicates that the motion was to make the improvements at the wastewater treatment plant. The secretary called me and talked to me about it, and I suggested we put this in the minutes, accepting that when we accept these minutes, they become the official record. So if the president will concur that that was intent to have the fence around the water treatment plant, I think we'll be in good shape.
That's correct. If I stated wastewater treatment plant, I meant to say water treatment plant.
Okay, so with that in mind, I move to approve consent item
1B.
1B.
We have a motion by Vice President Rose to approve consent item 1B with the modification of wastewater treatment plant to be water treatment plant in the minutes.
Second.
Seconded by Secretary Treasurer Flynn. Any comments? Hearing none, all in favor indicate by raising your hand. Motion passes unanimously. Okay, item number 2, receive comments from Audit Committee regarding the fiscal year 2018 audit. Would you like to start first, Vice President Rose?
Well, I would like to say that it was an interesting discussion on the audit. In the Audit Committee, we had a few items. I won't say several or numerous, but a few items that were basically sent back to be researched and revised, and I am going to count on our auditor to discuss each one of those to see whether they were approved in the document that we have here, because I didn't get a chance to review it prior to the meeting.
Okay, for me, I thought things went really, really well. We had a great discussion. As usual, staff did led by Stephen, did a great job. There were a few things that, as Vice President Rose points out, that we discussed, and look forward to hearing how those issues were resolved. And if there are no other comments, invite you to proceed, sir.
All right.
Item two.
Good evening, President Wilson, board members. As Mr. Rose said, we did have some discussion points in the audit committee that we went over. There's a couple of things about disclosures that I wanted to verify before changing. And so, since you haven't had a chance to look it over, all of the changes that were discussed and suggested were able to be made.
Okay.
Okay. And Mr. Kolchik also updated the MD&A discussion part that discussed next year's budget. So I think everything that we were potentially wanting to change were changed. Okay.
Okay.
Don't have the specific page numbers, that information with me, but those changes were made.
Okay.
Okay. So to just go over the agenda real quick, we'll discuss the objectives and scope of the audit, the actual financial statements, the financial highlights, the overview of the audit results, of course, and required governance communications. Our objective is to conduct the audit in accordance with government auditing standards and to plan and perform the audit to obtain reasonable assurance about whether the financial statements are free of material misstatement. Okay. And this is a full scope audit, and so we look at all of the district's funds and opine on them accordingly. Where to find what in the audit? So you have the PDF, the audit. If there's anything particular you're wanting to look at, this is just kind of a good reference point as far as where to find that information. The management discussion and analysis is a good overview of the results for the year. Then you have the actual financial statements, 11 through 16. The notes to the financials will go into more detail about the city's assets, your debt, pension, etc. And then the report on compliance and internal controls at the very back. Okay. Financial highlights on the government-wide financials. So these front financials include the MUD's long-term assets and your long-term debt. The total net position for the MUD was $27 million. It did increase by $4.1 million, or 17.9%. And 7.7 million of that net position is unrestricted. Okay. This is an increase from 2017's balance of 5.1 million.
Pardon me. Can I ask Stephen a quick question? If you had to give your best guess, what do you think our working capital is? I.e., as we all know, the first part of the fiscal year, we actually lose money until we hit the summer. And then that's when we make all of our money. What do you estimate, and I know it can change year to year, but what do you think that burn rate is for that first 6 to 7 months?
Well, it varies year to year because we do have projects running, and especially right now when we have two projects. One, we're trying to go out for bond, and one's an overrun. So that kind of burns a little bit quicker, especially when we're looking about 1.5, 1.6
But
in deficit there.
But if you exclude the extraordinary items, but if you just looked at
The working capital
operations, yeah.
what we're trying to keep in right now is about $2 million. That's what we need to be comfortably. That gives us roughly a little over 90 days in case anything comes up there. That's kind of what we're aiming for.
Okay.
We've been working on the reserve policy, trying to get that narrowed down. But comfortably, if it starts to get to $1 million early, then we know we got some problems. We need to hurry get some cash in there. But $2 million is where we need to stay as our working capital.
Okay, thank you.
And also, the district only had $360,000 of new debt for the year. And so your overall debt did decrease for the year by approximately $1 million, from $23 million to $22 million. General fund. So the general fund, where your main operations are, the unassigned fund balance for that fund increased from 4.26 to 7.25 million. Expenditures were 6.9 million compared to 6.7 the year before, but you had an even better increase in revenues. Revenues increased 801,000 or 8% due to increased water and wastewater charges. One measure of financial health is looking at the unassigned fund balance for a fund and looking at how many months of in operating expenses it would cover. And that number is up again for the MUD. It's at 10.5 months compared to 6.3 the year before. And so you're going to take that unassigned, and with all of the projects you have going on right now, you can choose to assign it, commit it, etc. And so that number is always going to be fluctuating. But again, the higher it is, the more flexibility the district has as far as assigning it for future capital projects and other matters. Okay, so that's a good number.
We, as part of, Bill and I have been looking at this, kind of our policy on where we're going to be going forward with the various funds. And do you have a rule of thumb? I see we're at 10.5 months, 6.5 last year. And we've read 50 documents, right, Bill? There's a whole bunch. Is there a general rule of thumb in your mind?
Well, the government auditing standards are mostly built around municipalities and counties, states, etc. The district's kind of its own animal, but in a lot of ways it's similar to a city because of the type of operations that you have. And the only guidance that they have is they don't set a maximum. They depend on the city council, or in this case the district board, to see what the maximum needs to be depending on future projects. But they do set a minimum, and the minimum is 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're well above that and at a healthy level. Okay. As far as budget versus actual, the water revenue was a little too optimistic and led to 393 negative variance, and an overall negative revenue variance of 292,000. But that was more than offset with a good positive expense variance, particularly in the water department and capital outlays totaling 1.99 million. Now, I'm sure some of those capital outlays were just deferred until the next fiscal year, and so don't get too excited about those variants, particularly in that particular line item, but that is a good overall budget versus actual. Capital Projects Fund continues its expansion and plant operations with 5.5 million in 2018 expenditures, with the ending construction in progress balance of 20 million. That's one of the biggest numbers we do from all of our cities and our MUDs, etc. And I'm sure y'all are just as more anxious than anybody to wrap that up and make it no longer in progress.
It'll be done in 2 weeks.
2 weeks, yeah, 2 weeks.
Awesome. Or not. What's that sarcasm?
running joke. No mas.
I didn't think that was the word I got on that.
That was a joke, by the way.
Yes, I finally got it. It's like, took me a second. Overview of audit results. Okay, so big picture, the front opinion, pages 1 and 2. The district receives an unmodified audit opinion, which is the one that TCQ, your bondholders, everybody wants to see. So no issues, excuse me, no issues there. The very back report, if there was any compliance issues with the IRS, TCQ, granting agencies, etc., we would disclose it there. Any other material weaknesses as far as internal controls in the way that the MUD processes financial transactions, so we would report it there, and that is also a clean report. There were only 3 audit adjustments. The largest one was provided by the finance director, and so that was just something to run by us, and it looked good. The other 2 were very minor in nature, so no issues there. And as we go along, we select some random invoices. We look at year-end accounts payable. We request certain invoices from the finance director and staff, and nothing that we came across was unusual in nature, and nothing couldn't be adequately explained. Okay. Governance communication, since the board isn't on site here at the district while we go through the audit process, there's just certain required communications that we do communicate. It's in the 3 or 4 page letter separate from the audit PDF that you have. Qualitative aspect, no issues, no difficulties in performing the audit. Us and management did agree on the audit adjustments that needed to be made, and of course no disagreements along the way. We would like to thank the district's audit committee, Mr. Rose and Mr. Wilson, and management, Mr. Carmen, Mr. Krolchik, and all of the audit staff. As usual, everybody was really responsive to all of our requests. Everything was there and ready to go from day one. And when you have turnover, you always worry about that a little bit with Ms. Gonzalez that was here for so long, but very seamless. And I'd just like to extend my appreciation to the finance director and everybody for this. It makes everyone's job easier, and we appreciate that.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Just a comment. Anytime you go through an audit, no matter what business you're in or whether you're in a municipality, you get a little nervous. I mean, I know in my background you get nervous. And I know Stephen was probably a little nervous because this, I think, was his first full-blown audit. And it looks from everything what we're seeing and hearing, it went very, very well. So my compliments to Stephen, certainly Carmen, Lori, and the entire staff. This was just outstanding and makes our lives a lot easier when you sit here and listen to an audit like that and can move on. So well done.
I'll entertain a motion.
Okay, I move to accept the fiscal year 2018 annual financial audit performed by Lafayette and Company, PLLC, and request that it be placed on the web along with the presentation.
We have a motion by Vice President Rose to accept the FY 2018 annual financial audit performed by Lafayette Company, PLLC. Do I have a second? And placed on the web.
I'll second.
This is seconded by Director Chapman. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor indicate by raising your hand. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, sir.
Yep,
Thank you.
thank you. And once again, staff, outstanding job.
Kudos.
Should have GFOA award here.
Okay, item number 4, report regarding easement acquisition from Lee Hodge PE and Half Associates for the construction of water transmission line to elevated water tank located on T.W. King Road.
Good evening. All right, you'll have to excuse my voice. My allergies are getting the better of me lately. I'll quickly go through the purpose of this project and the alignment overview. We'll go through each of the proposed easements one by one, and then we'll review the cost estimate and the project schedule. So we've gone over the purpose in the past, but basically our whole goal is to increase the pipe size between the storage tanks and the high service pump station and the eastern elevated storage tank. So as you're probably aware, the blue is what is already installed in the areas that are still under construction. We had the phase 1, which begins right out here, and then the PD 30 has been put in by that developer. And then our current design for the interconnect starts on the west with a red line and goes all the way to the elevated storage tank to the east. So to go over the horizontal alignment in a little bit more detail, and the easements and permits we're getting, we'll start on the west, again, right by PD 30. Here you can kind of see the alignment weaves in and out where we start out an Encore's easement, so that just involves a permit from them. We've already had coordination, so now we just need to officially submit the permit and the fees associated with that. Whenever we get next to the sound wall that TxDOT put in recently, we jump out actually into TxDOT right away. There was not enough room to fit the water line between their transmission towers and the sound wall, so we have to push it to the south. So we stay in TxDOT's right away until we get to the retaining wall at Davis, and then we jump back out into Encore's easement. Once we get past the sound wall, we actually jump back into TxDOT's right-of-way. So they have a kind of a triangle piece of right-of-way there by the Church of Christ. And so we're in their right-of-way until we get to the very southeast corner of that lot. And that is our first easement. And I'll try to tell you in your packets which exhibits we're looking at. So this one is actually on page 49 of your packet. You can actually see the easement document we have in there. And all we need from the Lake City Church of Christ is that very corner of their property. From there, our alignment turns and goes to the north. So the next easement is actually a 10-foot easement out of that triangle piece of property, and that's actually owned by First Madison Bank. Continuing to the east, we have the Vineyards Apartments. The owner is actually Amore Trophy Club, LLC, and we plan to acquire a 10-foot easement all along the back of their property. This is going to go underneath the very northern lane of their driveway. There's kind of a parking lane back there. So we'll put that in. We actually adjusted this easement on the very northeast corner. Our standard 10 feet actually clipped the corner of a building, so we've revised that easement to be a little bit narrower in that area to where the building is not in the easement. From there, we go to the Medical Plaza property, and this property actually has two separate owners. So the west half is the Trophy Club 2850 Medical Properties LP, and we'll be acquiring a 10-foot easement from them.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
Is 10 feet wide enough for subsequent maintenance?
I think so. Everywhere where we're getting a 10-foot easement, the mud already has an easement adjacent to it, so there's already an existing 10-foot easement just to the north of this, then we're acquiring additional 10 feet. So it'll be a 20-foot easement total.
I have a question later on, but it's that same topic. So when we have an easement in the area, we don't go in and back in and stay in our own easement rather than acquiring additional?
Ideally, we would. A lot of these areas have retaining walls and things that we would have to tear out and put back. So we decided to go ahead and leave the existing line in place and build a parallel line and acquire a little bit more easement.
Okay.
And then just to the east of that, also on the Trophy Club Medical Plaza, is the 2800 Medical Properties LP. So again, that's a 10-foot easement just extending all the way across that property. On the east side of the hospital, we have an existing easement going to the south to 114. And in that area, we are going to stay in that same easement and just abandon the existing line and put in a new line. The Trophy Lodging LTD is the Homewood Suites site, and we'll be getting 10 feet from the back of their lot. Again, I think there's a 5-foot existing easement there, so we're going to get 10 in addition to that. Easement 7 is actually from the town of Trophy Club. It's the site where they just built that asphalt parking lot, and we'll be getting 15 feet from the back of their property.
Out of curiosity, did they pave clear back to that back wall, or did they leave an open area?
I'm sorry, what was your question?
Where that easement there is? Oh,
Mhm.
I see that picture. Never mind. Disregard. Look at the picture.
So from there, we have an existing easement that again, we're going to abandon the existing line and replace it with a new line, just west of Trophywood Drive. We'll be boring under Trophywood Drive to the east side. And on the east side of Trophywood Drive, we will be getting a 10-foot easement from the Town of Trophy Club at their town hall site there. And again, we're adjacent to the right-of-way there, so we'll only be getting 10 feet and not 15. And then on the actual Trophy Club Town Hall site, the town relocated the water line to get it out of the way of their building whenever they built their town hall. And they dedicated a 15-foot easement whenever they did that. We're still trying to locate those official documents, but that should be an existing 15-foot easement that has been provided by them. So we are requiring a total of 8 new easements. You can see the approximate areas listed for a total of about just under 40,000 square feet of easements. So these are the estimated project costs. We have not updated the construction cost yet. We're still in the process of finalizing the plans, so we should have that updated next month. So that has not changed. We are acquiring the 8 parcels, so we have the right-of-way acquisition services in there for that. And we also, for the time being, assumed, I believe, $10 a square foot. So that's where our property owner compensation for easements number comes from. The appraiser is actually looking at all these properties right now, and they should probably have us this week, their appraised value of what they think it's worth for them to give us an easement. So we'll have a better number on that hopefully this week. There's no guarantee that they will give us the easements for that amount. We'll have to, if they don't agree to that amount, then we'll have to negotiate from there. So I don't think our total project costs have changed. Again, we haven't updated the construction cost estimate, but we're still sitting around $4.4 million for this project.
Do you anticipate it will change?
I don't. Nothing's drastically changed, so I don't think there'll be any major changes to the cost estimate. As far as the project schedule goes, again, we're wrapping up the final design now and the easement appraisals, and we should have both of those done this month. As I mentioned, we are already coordinating with TxDOT and Encore, but we will officially submit permits to them probably next month once we have the plans finalized. We're also getting some SUE test holes, which locates a few of the lines underground to make sure we're clear in TxDOT's right-of-way. And then I believe we're still on schedule to have the right-of-way acquisition done and advertised for construction in March, and hopefully begin construction in May of this year.
So when is all of the the easements, those 8 easements, when does that whole process begin? Has it already begun?
So yes, we have not contacted the property owners yet, but that will be the next step. So as soon as we get the appraisals back, we'll make sure that everybody's okay with the appraisal values, and we'll approach the owners and see if they will give us the easements for those amounts.
Do you anticipate any issues with that?
We don't know. We won't know until we.
I mean, if you go to one of the properties and they say it's $100,000, just make up a number, and they balk at that number, I mean, that's where the negotiation
Correct.
comes into play?
Correct.
Leah, 2 things. I did have that discussion with town brass earlier today and sent you a copy of the plat that they claimed that they had filed with Tarrant County. So where that is in the process and why it hasn't shown up yet, we don't know.
Okay.
They didn't know either, so it's a matter of when that occurs. They did mention to me that some of the trees that were in planter boxes along those commercial properties were in fact required as a part of the original permitting for those properties.
Okay.
So how the valuation of those trees works out as a part of this appraisal process is still to be determined, but I did not get a chance to tell you that.
Okay.
They had suggested that. And then finally, with respect to the current estimate that we have there, we are still carrying in that number a 20% project contingency. And I would expect that as we get to final design, that contingency number would come down a little
Correct.
bit.
Correct.
Let me ask you a question. we discussed the easement widths.
Mhm.
If we get in a tight spot, exactly how much easement do we need? I mean, 10 foot's an absolute minimum, right? In order to work a project like this? Ordinarily, you go for 15?
Yes, yes.
Okay,
We only have 10 where we have an adjacent easement.
okay. Thank you.
Yeah, 15 is what we had on the phase 1 that was just installed. That was a 15-foot easement.
know you
Or
mentioned-
actually, I think it was a 10-foot easement, but it was adjacent to an existing easement.
Anchors on a lot of backhoes are wider than 10, so that's why most folks try to get at least 15.
Yeah.
So when you know what I'm talking about on your backhoe, when you put, it's narrower than 10 feet.
I would say it's not over 10.
I would, it's just, well, if you're working in the center of your easement, that's great. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, all landings aren't on the center line. So, 5 foot, obviously, we can't go in there and work a 5 foot easement.
Right.
Thank you.
And that's all I have unless there's additional questions.
We are planning on coming back next month with the
Yes.
final design, cost estimate, all of that good
Yes.
stuff.
Correct.
Thank you.
I appreciate the update.
All right, no problem. Thank you.
Okay, item number 5. Consider and take appropriate action to approve bid for upgrade, replacement, and installation of exhaust ventilation system in the fire station bays and award contract number 2019-012-101 as part of fiscal year 2019 capital outlays for the Trophy Club Fire Department. Chief Carroll?
Good evening, Mr. President and Directors. I'm really just here tonight to answer any questions that you might have on this item, but also to thank you for putting the safety and the health of your firefighters at such a high priority. It really means a lot to them, means a lot to me as their chief, and I think just being able to remove the exhaust that they are in the environment of every single day during vehicle checks and as they're entering and leaving for calls, it makes a big difference, and it's something that we can take care of and make them safer. So with that, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Chief, we discussed this, 6 months ago or something like this, and we have the funds, right, Stephen, that's been allocated? Has anything changed materially on the cost of that, or are we still on target?
No, we're still actually under target for what we said back 6 months ago. I think we had 75,000.
We had 75,000.
And the bids all came in quite a bit under, so I think around 64 is where we're at.
How long will this project take to implement?
From start to finish, they're saying about 4 weeks at the most. That includes tearing out the old system and putting in the new.
Will that require moving the equipment out into the elements for the duration of the 4 weeks, or will we be in and out?
No, sir. It'll be, we may have to move some equipment around in the bays, but we'll be in the protected bays for all that time. Thank you.
Okay.
I did have a question on the order of things. It says here the current exhaust system is to be removed and sent to auction, and then with the board's approval, the new system will be purchased and installed. You're not going to leave the exhaust system currently, or is it just totally worthless and you're just going to pull it?
We're pulling the current system because the current system is a scrubber type system.
Right.
So it's bringing the exhaust in, trying to filter it best it can, and then blowing the air back out. The new system is a complete ventilation, so it removes the exhaust directly from the tailpipe on the vehicle out the top of the roof.
Yeah, I'm just thinking timing. You're removing the existing system, and how long before, if you're not doing, if there's a lapse of a couple of weeks.
Yes, sir. There will be a lapse of a couple of weeks because they're going to have to get that equipment out of the way to do the install. But to be quite honest with you, the system that's in place now is doing an absolutely terrible job, so we're not going to see much difference.
Okay, I
We
kind
just
of wondered
have
if there
bay
was.
doors open a little more often than usual.
Yeah, I was just worried if there was any additional risk to the firemen.
Yes, sir.
Because we've removed the old one and there's nothing
right.
doing the filtering at this, till
Like I
we
said,
get the new one.
the plan that we have in place now is we'll have to shuffle some vehicles around a little bit to accommodate the construction needs, and then like I said, we'll have the bay doors open quite a bit during the daytime to help ventilate that as much as possible.
That's good.
Anything else?
Any other questions? I'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve award of contract number 2019-01-2101 to Magna Grip Group in the amount not to exceed $63,082 and approve the general manager's execution of the contract.
Okay, we have a motion by Vice President Rose to award contract number 2019-012-101 to Magna Grip Group not to exceed $63,082 and direct the general manager to execute whatever documents to get the agreement in place. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Director Castonway. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor indicate by raising your hand. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank
Thank
you,
you,
Mr.
sir.
President and
Thank you,
directors.
Chief.
Thank you.
Okay, item number 6, consider and take appropriate action regarding approval of a amendment to contract with Alliance Fence Company for additional fencing at the district's water treatment plant facility. Staff?
I guess I will take this. So we approved replacing the fence at the water plant here last month. Went out with the contractor. We walked the fence and everything, and we did talk about the Fort Worth portion of that. He did put a price in there to pressure wash and stain the Fort Worth part of the fence. And then also up here in this corner, I just wanted to bring to the board's attention, there is an AT&T pedestal behind a little part of the fence that comes out right across from the drop box here. So it's hiding the AT&T fence. This was not included in our first bid because really it's not our fence, but I just wanted to bring it. I got a price for it. I wanted to bring it to the board's attention just because we're gonna have a brand new nice fence there, and I didn't know if you wanted that other little fence in front of that.
Is it included in the contract?
No,
No.
No,
it's
So-
included. It's on.
there's a
If you
bid
look at page
afterwards
69,
there. Another
one of them
10
is for
grand.
the Fort Worth fault, and then you have the AT&T box fence also.
So these bid amounts above don't include the two estimates below?
No, the approved contract that we did not include the Fort Worth vault and stain.
I got that, but I was looking at the additional amount. Yeah. The amendments are for those items, right?
Yes.
Got
So
it.
the contract that was awarded was a 62,875.
Yep. I'm with you.
So I just wanted to bring it back to the board, let you guys decide on how you wanted it to look out there and how we wanted to move forward with it.
Any other comments, questions?
Well, who actually owns the fence? Is it AT&T's fence? Did they put it in, or did we put it in?
I do not believe we installed that portion of fence.
Well, then wouldn't that make it their property? We really shouldn't be messing with their property?
Well, I think it's probably our property, they just probably have an easement there.
Have we had any discussions with either Fort Worth or?
Our plan is to get them to pay for it, but the flip side of that is we don't anticipate having our contractor stain and do everything but these two pieces of fences. The hope that we can get those folks to step up and pay for their share.
Have we gotten several bids, or is this a single bid?
This was a single bid from the approved contract.
For which we did get 3 bids.
We did get 3 bids for the
It's just
original.
It's an addendum cost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's on the table.
Any other discussion? Fair enough.
My only comment is I would recommend we do have, communicate with each of those entities, if they installed the original fences to avoid future conflicts about who owns the new fence. It would be good to make sure that's clear.
Do we need to get a release from them, or just a verbal? I mean, probably, I'm a hard copy person, but
If the fence is owned by the district.
I really don't know.
I mean, if we're gonna fund it, then my expectation was it'd be a district fence going forward, and I think just the communication between the parties indicating the fence, current fence is failing, it's on the district property, district's willing to, we'll try to get them to pay, but if not,
Okay.
and we fund it, then I'd like the documents to establish that it's a district fence going forward.
I think that's wise.
I would add for everybody's benefit that I have reviewed the document that shows the meter station from Fort Worth existing in an easement. So it's an easement on mud property. When that fence fell apart, just in the last 16, 18 months during my time here, it actually, a piece of it fell in the parking lot. We requested, well, Mike and his guys got together and wired it back into place. And Fort Worth did come out and install new fencing around it. So all that wood is new, but they never stained it or tried to make it, the remainder of the fence there also looks pretty weathered at this point. But there was never any statement that they would come back out and stain it or preserve it in any way. So it seems to me that the lifespan of that fence that they put in is going to be significantly shorter if it's not preserved using a sealant. And, it's in our interest to have the fence look like the fence behind it, just simply for appearance's sake. So
In that case, it sounds like it's clearly Fort Worth's
Yeah,
fence.
exactly.
I think they wouldn't object to us staining and preserving their fence.
Right.
The only thing I would add from that, from the time we started talking to Fort Worth about fixing their fence, it was probably at least 6 months before they came and fixed it.
But is this something I need to get an email where you say, hey, do you have any objections to us staining the fence so it's consistent with the renewal?
we would send a letter, certainly, asking if we could, and tell them the cost that we have. It's going to be done at the time of another contract, and that we'd respectfully ask for the right to deduct it from our monthly bill.
Like it.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve the award of an amendment to contract number 2018-12-1701 with Alliance Fence Company, adding an additional amount that is not to exceed $9,975, and approve the general manager's execution of the contract after coordination with AT&T and the city of Fort Worth.
Second.
We have a motion by Vice President Rose to amend contract number 2018-121-701 in the amount of not to exceed $9,975 to make improvements to the fence, but after coordination with the city of Fort Worth and AT&T. And it was seconded by Secretary Treasurer Flynn. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor indicate by raising your hand. Motion passes unanimously. Item number 7, consider and take appropriate action regarding the installation of a new high-speed booster pump at the district's water booster station. A, discussion regarding the funding of project. B, award of contract number 2019-012-102 to contractor selected by the Board of Directors for installation of the booster pump improvements. Staff?
Yeah, let me start this one off just by saying we've been to the board on a few occasions with this item. We first went out to bid, I want to say about a year ago. I think that's included in the staff report. And the bids came back higher than the budgeted amount. We got back up with our engineer and said, okay, let's look at what constraints we put in the timing of, the delivery that was put out for bid on that first go around. And we did that. We put it out for bid again, and all of the bids came in higher than the first time around. Subsequently, we looked at other ways to deal with this cost overrun. We're currently budgeted. The total budgeted amount was approximately $370. I think we've spent something close to $40,000 on the engineering and procurement services, leaving about $320 left for the purchase of this high service pump and VFD. I told the board that we would come back with a recommendation after we shared this with the board. I want to say that was in December. We didn't have a recommendation for what to do. I was just letting you know that it had come back in higher than estimated. Since that time, we've evaluated different things like, can we finance the part of that that's over the budgeted amount, which is still, we're going off the number we budgeted in fiscal year 2017. At this point, we're at the place where the staff is making the recommendation that the board fund the project and approve it to go forward with the existing bid. So that's kind of where we're at this point in time. It does mean expending either from reserves with an anticipation that later in the year we come back with a budget amendment to square this up so that the budget matches the expenditure.
Hey, Carmen, do we have an idea what's went up, not quite 50%, 40%, 45% in less than a year, if I'm reading that right? Why so much?
Mike can chime in on this. We had a lot of discussions with the engineer, and they feel like it has to do with how busy these guys are in the market. And all three of the bids went up this time. I think at least two of the bidders were there for both bids, maybe three of them. There was four on the first go-around and only three bids this time.
These three were at our last bid also.
As I read the packet here, it says every one of these bids were higher than bids received first allocation ranging for the first solicitation ranging from 592 to 696. Are we saying that was the first solicitation that they were at that range? That's the current solicitation, no? Yeah, that's a current solicitation. Do we know what the bids were? Can you tell us what the bids were on the first solicitation? A range?
Did we have that in a board packet back when it went out the first time?
I don't know if we did or not.
I have a second question. Was this an item that was considered to be taken out of bond funds on the line? Funded? It was not considered to do that. That was just to back up the wastewater treatment plant if we needed to, right?
We had an extensive discussion about the possibility of, we're going out for a $7.2 million bid. It's been approved, both with respect to the maximum amount and with respect to the scope of water and wastewater projects to be funded. We had an internal discussion with our bond counsel and our financial advisor about the possibility of financing this $300,000 in addition, and then going back and asking TCEQ for that right. The staff brought up the point that the bonds that we're going out for are likely to be 30-year bonds, which is too long of a term for an asset that might likely only last for a decade.
Yeah.
And in order to have a bond issue that includes both a 10-year part, if you will, or a 10-year term part and a 30-year term part, we would have had that in the original TCEQ application. So we kind of met with a dead end on that line of inquiry.
So long story short, as I look at this cost, we have set aside in our budget, correct, the original 300 and some thousand, and we spent 400,000 of, right?
So back in fiscal year 17, we set aside 370.
Okay, so that's set aside.
Right now, we have remaining 325, 400 roughly.
Okay, so what I'm looking at now is looking at undesignated reserves somewhere out there to fund this project for roughly, if we got 325, that's what? 270?
270, roughly.
Yeah, something like that. Additional funding in order to pay for the project.
So the direction you're looking at, just kind of give you an idea of what we have in account wise. If you're looking at reserves, we have a savings account that we put 200 aside for water each year. We've been doing that for the last several fiscal years. We have roughly 400, 450 in that fund that's set aside for water, for infrastructure replacement, improvement. We also have GASB. Now, it depends on how you classify this as. Is this a improvement or is this a replacement? Depends on how you classify it.
It's a mix.
It's a mix. So like I said, it depends on how, what the board's direction wants to do on the classification. But we also have GASB that's set aside too. So we'd have enough money in there. And I can,
How much you got in GASB? If you got it right there.
let me see what I have for water. GASB water, I have 150 remaining in that. That's strictly for the water side.
560,000 total, 22 funds.
Yep.
And does
Now,
that,
there's 97,000 in sewer. That's completely up to how you guys want to do that. Roughly another 100,000 if you want to do the sewer side, but that would clean out sewer for
But with-
water and sewer
one
and gas.
quick question. All right, the 7.4 in unassigned fund balance, these two funds are separate from that, correct? Or is that included in that unassigned fund balance?
So you're asking a question that we're currently working on right now in the reserve committee here. They are technically standalone accounts, so they are true reserves that are actually not in the assigned part of it. So the way it's classified now, yes, that money's in the unassigned side.
Okay.
Now, if you look in the cash report, those are on the restricted side. Like I said, our terminology, the way it's been the last several years, we're trying to get that narrowed down so we can get this the way it needs to be for everybody's understanding. But these are funds that the only restriction really is it has to be a board approval to move those funds and spend them the way the board sees fit. That's the main difference on these funds versus what else is out there.
So here's my thought process at the moment. That's a qualifier if you've ever heard one. I'm thinking to take the funds out of the designated reserves. Water is 150. I don't want to touch wastewater for a water issue here if I can avoid it. And go into the undesignated reserves and get the remainder. Now, the thought process is if I zero out the water reserves, then if anything happens, there's the problem with doing this. If anything happens, you're going to have to come back to the board in order to get more funds to go in there. So the other side of that equation is if you don't want to get into that boat, then we take the funds out of undesignated reserves and let the current reserves sit where they are, which just means when we get to the point when we get the reserve policy before us, get it adopted and get into the discussion on how much money's going where, we're going to be down 270,000 from where we were today. But here again, this is an issue in my mind that needs to be resolved.
I do want to say, just gonna let everybody know, right now we are spending out of reserves that's not designated for anything yet for the overrun in the wastewater treatment plant that we are looking to get reimbursed back once this bond gets approved and gets out in the open market. So we have the capability of taking from the savings account that we have now, but putting it in and reimbursing it back once we get the bond money. That way it doesn't touch working capital or anything like that right now.
How much do you anticipate
Just one
that reimbursement's going to be?
on the first time around.
My numbers, my calculations, I'm looking between 1.6, 1.7, but what we send over to TCEQ is a different number. Now, remember, this is something that we thought was going to be finished long before now. So as time goes along, that number does grow. We do have engineering costs that keeps going and everything else. So I believe, top of my head, I'll have to look at it. I think we submitted over like 1.3. So there's a variance there, difference that we'll have to address and see if we want to go back to TCEQ to, if we have any left over to keep up the rest of that. But you're looking anywhere from about 1.6, 1.7 is what we look at total.
So
we're
that's
gonna be
gonna
overrun.
be in addition to the 7.4, right?
That's in
once
the,
those
no,
funds
that's
come
in the
back.
7.4. We mean addition,
No,
I'm sorry.
no, once we reimburse ourselves. So once that bond is issued.
Yes.
Then we go back and reimburse ourselves, so then we're gonna receive another 1.6 or 1.7 million.
Correct. That is correct.
Well, we will.
Can, if you decide, if the board
It's-
decides
yeah.
to do it, so,
Well, that was the purpose of getting the bond, was to do it.
well, maybe.
Well, that's not, maybe that's what we said.
We would have the capability, yes, in the
Yeah,
eyes
it
of
was to
TCEQ.
develop
put
the
it that way.
capability, not
Yeah.
to say that we were gonna do it at the time.
So,
Yeah, right now, I mean, the number we did submit over there, it's 1.3 roughly there, and we're getting close to finishing up. There's not a lot left besides the retainage out there, remaining funds to be spent. So we're getting pretty close to wrapping this all up on that side.
The good news is, and I would like to have seen a different problem than this, but the good news is because of the change of rates and the savings on the expense side, we're much better financial shape than we were last year or 2 years ago. But
yeah, I would say, given if his working capital number's correct of 2 million, there's 7.4 here, that's roughly 5.4 million. Somehow I think we'll be able to manage to scrape by and find 250,000 or so,
270.
270.
No, no, be careful about assuming that we have 5 million just kind of sitting there.
No, 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 I understand.
Yeah, we're,
But what I'm saying is that I don't think this represents a existential threat to the district.
correct.
Correct. The financial qualifier has been noted. Thank you.
General Manager Carter?
Just two things. In the general manager's notes from back in January of 18, all he said was the low bid on the first go-around was 513,000. So that's, in this case, the low bid was 592. I didn't record the high bid on that first go-around, so
That's helpful.
that's what I could get. And then secondly, I would make note of the fact that based on the presentation we had from Half and Associates, we may well begin the acquisition of easements before we have proceeds from a bond. Now, I don't think that's going to be a significant portion of the, I want to say they had $400,000.
Yeah, 373,000.
But that is another expenditure that could be coming out of where we're at, along with the remainder of the wastewater treatment plant project, so.
And for the board's edification, ordinarily, those type of expenses, when we make them, there will be a resolution that goes along with them to authorize us to reimburse ourselves from the bond proceeds when we get the bond proceeds.
I think the board previously with respect to wastewater, previously adopted resolutions expressing its intent to
Yeah.
reimburse itself.
But this would be for water. The water, yeah, the
It
water.
needs to be adopted prior to incurring the expense.
Okay, okay. We'll need to keep track of that.
Any other discussion?
I have a motion.
By all means, proceed.
Okay. Before I start the motion, we had generally in concurrence that the additional funding required is gonna come out of undesignated reserves and be brought forward into the budget. Is that the general concurrence?
I think just having it come out of the unassigned fund balances, just to
Okay.
not overly complicate matters.
Okay,
Agreed.
because it'll get moved forward into the budget, because that's not in the budget. Okay, I move to approve award of contract number 2019-01-2102 to Raymar Construction in an amount not to exceed $592,000 and approve the general manager's execution of the contract and that the additional funding required will come from as undesignated reserves.
Okay, we have a motion by Vice President Rose to award contract number 2019-01-2102 to Raymar Construction not to exceed $592,000 and to direct the general manager to execute whatever agreements necessary to get this agreement in place, and that those funds come out of our unassigned fund balance.
The additional funds required.
The additional funds required come out of the unassigned fund balance. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Director Chapman. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor indicate by raising your hand. Motion passes unanimously.
Mr. President, I'd just like to say thank you for that. We're anxious to get this work done and get it done in the off-season while, in fact, we can do the work before we hit the high-flow season, so thank you.
Okay, item number 8. Consider and take appropriate action regarding proposal for GIS database support and hosting from Half and Associates as part of fiscal year 2019 capital outlays. Staff?
Mr. President, this is a budgeted expenditure in this year's capital budget. It is $30,000, and at least the base contract is $30,000 and exceeds my authority to purchase, so I need to seek board approval for it. I'm excited about this project in the sense that this will take our current set of CAD drawings that we have old style, what we call map books, right? And we have our folks in the field that drive around with a hard copy of the map for the water system and wastewater system assets. and convert it into an electronic form that can be easily updated and accessible via, more modern output devices like cell phones and tablets. It's going to be a great boon to us to get it in place. And the additional thing I guess I want to point out is that this becomes software as a service. So our GIS system will reside in the cloud, i.e. Half and Associates is providing these GIS services to many of their clients. I would point out that one of their clients is the town of Westlake. So if you go to the town of Westlake and ask them to pull up a particular plat, they can show you where the water assets are, the wastewater assets are, perhaps even who they belong to. And
What about easements?
we would hope that, there's always going to be some discrepancy between what your GIS system says and what's actually in the ground. So I would hope that all of the easements will be recorded accurately there. There's some other nice features. You can pull up tax data for all the plats there once it's within a GIS system. I think this is really a good approach, and I'm excited to recommend this for board approval.
Thank you. Any questions, directors?
Well, I see that the database is going to reside on their services, but we're supposed to own it. I'm not
That's
just
correct.
reading this. And it's supposed to be protected with emergency backup power and that kind of stuff. Do you know if they have regular testing of their disaster recovery and that stuff?
It's my understanding that they do, indeed. I have not physically inspected their sites to look at that. I would also let you know that we're in further discussions about how we might append our computerized maintenance management software, work order software, to this project as another provision of software and services to us, from a third party, as opposed to us buying a server, implementing all of that on our own. We've looked at a couple of GIS-based CMMS systems and have been working on a proposal out to one of those vendors to see if they would in fact provide the same service through half that would allow us to take advantage of having both of these assets in the same place. That said, I am anxious to go and inspect their site, just make sure that they have proper security and backup power for their systems, but it's my understanding that they do have that in place.
Director Chapman, if you go to page 76 in the bottom, it talks about the security.
I'm sorry?
If you go to page 76 on the packet,
Yeah,
that way in the web hosting in the bottom. the
yeah,
last
that's
paragraph.
role-based security. It doesn't say anything about physical or that kind of stuff.
Okay.
That's within the software is the role-based security, but there's more to security than just
Yeah, that's,
role-based inside the application.
yeah, that's just logical security. There's the other
And
98% of it.
if they make sure if they do penetration tests and, because that's our data. I mean, if it
Yeah.
gets copied or it could be misused. Okay, that was,
Vice President Rose, you have a
Yeah.
comment?
I do have a comment. Got a couple yellow items here. About fell off my chair. If you go to page 77, it's proposed fee schedule. It says GIS database development, $30,000 hourly.
Yeah, that's a mistake. Now, I shouldn't necessarily say mistake. The first proposal included the whole GIS database development, which included taking all of our CAD files, both the ones that were developed by our engineers as well as the ones that were submitted as red lines by developers, and putting all of that into an Esri GIS layer, actually 3 layers, one for water assets, one for sewer assets, and one for fire hydrants, and doing so as a lump sum. In negotiations with HAF, we reduced the lump sum amount and converted it to an hourly based contract. So if it takes less than the amount of hours that they propose to do that work, then they would not charge us for that because it's happening under the unit price contract. So that was something that came out. The way it's listed there looks pretty funky. It is not $30,000 an hour, so.
In the text, it says that it's hourly maximum, or it's maximum
Yes.
cost plus max.
Well,
The only thing is, it doesn't say how much they're charging us per hour.
That
That's
was going to be my
But,
question.
That's in the other
those dollars per hour are listed in the task order contract, the master service agreement contract.
Yeah, it's not in here, it's in the other document.
But we
have.
did approve that through the board, I want to say, in the last 6 months. And I can get you that fee schedule.
Yeah, I just don't wanna see them charging us $250, $300 an hour like HP does.
Right.
So I want to,
Page 84 has deliver rates.
Does it? Must have missed it.
Exhibit A, page 84.
Page 84. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think he included the other contract, yeah.
I hope there's
So,
nothing in there that's
Carmen-
$300.
Yeah, it's close. 325. Architect 5.
But that is not likely to be someone working on this project.
Yeah,
that's for-
I agree. I concur. I'm just trying, my issue is I'm looking for some way to clarify that.
Is the first paragraph under total fee? I think that's their effort to explain it.
Okay, well, it says the hourly fee, then it says cost plus max. And I don't think cost plus max is defined. For fees, half's effort will not exceed the maximum hourly fee. Well, I get that. And then it talks about on next paragraph down, it talks about direct costs such as GPS. And so my question would be, what are GPS costs? So I come away from this little section of the document confused.
I would point out to the board that when we were reviewing the purchase documents for the camera van, one of the items that were optional in that were a GPS stick and a transcender unit, the combination of which cost about $10,000. The scope for this first phase with the GIS database development is really simply to take our existing CAD files, so these are old engineering style drawings, convert them into GIS layers. If there are any missing pieces in there, the intent was that we have to get someone to come out and GPS those units and say, well, here's a whole pipe we know exists, but we don't have an existing drawing for it. I really don't think there's much of that out there, but that would be associated with that kind of a cost. If they were going to come out, send their survey crew out to do a GPS locate on a manhole, a line of some kind, that's where those would be. And if it were a third party, then it would be some sort of a multiplier on top of what the third party surveyor provided.
So I have a question, Carmen. Back to the costs again. At one point, I thought I heard you say that this was going to be a total of $30,000 in your estimation? Is that
For the
because?
development. Now, and that's the budgeted amount, and then there's an annual fee for software licensing and hosting.
I got that, but I thought you said somehow that was rolled into the other part. Did I hear that wrong?
No, the original lump sum estimate that I had was higher than this. We went back and negotiated it. And it was based largely, we had a presentation from them last year prior to budget development. I put the 30,000 in the budget for that purpose. So they lowered their price and they made it hourly so that it is in keeping with, in fact, our task order contract. So I don't know if that answers your question or not.
Sort of. I guess I'm getting to, when we get to the motion, are we going to say not to exceed $36,000? That's my question.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
where I'm at.
That's where I'm at. All right.
Okay.
I'm ready to make it, but I didn't know if there's still discussion.
There's still discussion, because I don't see any escrow type clauses in this thing unless it's under that ownership of documents.
Is it escrow?
Yeah, usually when you have a third-party software company, they've got programs and things like that that's hosted on their thing. But what if they get wiped out? What if they go out of business? Usually there is an escrow clause that says they've backed it up to tapes. Those tapes come to us so that we can host it somewhere else if they go out of business.
Well, I did not put that in or ask that it be in there. And this
I think it's
proposal,
something you should do with that kind of money.
so if you want to add that in, we'll certainly talk to them about it. That's not a,
Are we talking about a software escrow, or are we simply talking about getting a extract of our data in a format that's acceptable to us so we can transfer it to another GIS system?
Well, hopefully, if they're using standard formats, it should automatically transfer, but I'm saying we're paying for them to develop stuff.
Okay, yeah, so if I understand correctly, what he's specifically asking is that the source code that they're developing for us, we own, and they escrow that and make that available to us in the event of their untimely demise.
It's usually held off their site in a third party, like either a bank or some, Iron
law
Mountain or
firm
some
or-
other kind of.
Yeah.
Can we set up our system, if we have access to it, to do that automatically on our end?
You can copy the source code over to a,
Depends on whether we have the authority and the access to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's ours, right?
yes.
I would hope so. Usually, though, it's like we have access into this data part of it, not the background source and that kind of stuff. That's usually like admin rights and things like that. Customer clients don't usually have that kind of access to get to it at that level.
yeah, oftentimes they will grant us a non-exclusive perpetual right of use, which means it's not ours, it's theirs. But what he's calling out, which I'm an advocate of, if we pay you to develop it, then we want to own that source code.
Right. It's our data.
Yeah.
And we want a guaranteed copy of it in case,
Well-
not that I mean, I've seen these guys around for ages, so I don't expect them to go out of business, but it's better to be covered. You never know.
So they use a third-party software, the ARC, right?
Our GIS, yeah.
ArcGIS software. And they will use their license to create the GIS data that then we have the right to access. So at the end of the day, isn't our rights really limited to what they create using their software license, and can't we continually back that up?
Yeah, so it sounds like this is not development, but a reality configuration.
They're using their own third-party software, and they're just agreed to utilize their software to create a work product for us. And why don't we just back up that work product?
I don't think we have access to it, because aren't we viewing it through HAF? Aren't we?
We are, but it's a layer.
When we do so, when we access it, then we back it up, right?
Typically, your backup is data only. What he's referencing is the actual development. So they use the term development. As I listen to you more, what it sounds like is not truly development, but configuration, where they're configuring a existing solution for our need versus actually developing something for us.
Well, the web maps are not strictly data. Those are, according to this, they're JavaScript, which is
Data.
programming.
Which is programming,
Not
yeah.
code.
They're using the ArcGIS API for JavaScript, so they are writing JavaScript, customizing the code to our needs for the websites. Or, there's two different web maps, but they're using they're using APIs, and they are coding Java, and that's different than the GIS data that contains all the geographic points and that stuff. This is actually code, and usually that stuff is not where you can get at it. You can't get through it through the web interface. You usually use either Telnet or something else to get to the background server to back that stuff up. I would kind of hope they are backing it up and that kind of stuff, but according to the way I'm reading this, they are
So is the,
coding it.
is the work product that we desire to obtain software code or GIS data? I thought it was the latter.
The GIS data, well, we'd want that too, but what what's not listed here is that JavaScript that they're coding for us to create our website interfaces.
As I understand it, that is an app within the Esri development environment that they would take and, they're gonna take our CAD files and convert them in and say, you got manholes here, you got pipes there. And then in order for one of Mike's field guys to be able to pull it up on a telephone and look at it, it has to come through that conversion app. It kind of takes the Esri data that if we were working on a PC and doing development type work or, other types of, more sophisticated efforts rather than just trying to see where a manhole is, you would have to have the license on your machine. So it's a different sort of licensing for our field guys to be able to take an existing, it's effectively a database. I look at Esri.
Well, a database is just data points and, descriptions and that kind of stuff. That's data, and we automatically own it and hopefully back it up. What I'm saying is they are actually coding with APIs the background. When you talk to a browser with a JavaScript, the code running isn't actually on your PC. It's in the server, their server, and they're coding that, and it completely controls what you see on your PC, your mobile app, whatever, whether you use an iPad or whatever, and most of it's self-adaptive. It finds out what device you're using and adapts itself to that device. But that's JavaScript coding, and some of that stuff isn't easy. We don't want to redevelop this stuff if they go out of business or they lose the code or have a disaster. That's another reason is a lot of times they only back up data on a regular basis, not the code. The code is considered static, unless we put in a change, they probably don't back it up, or it's backed up on a yearly or something like that. But it's still, my thing is, if they're developing JavaScripts for us, Java code, to run the websites, that's our code. We're paying for it.
Agreed. I think that's certainly negotiable, and if you want to either defer this, you can, or if you want to approve it subject to those conditions being met, we can do it that way as well.
You're the other techie.
We can stipulate it, but I would recommend that that you work with staff to ensure the appropriate language is there. Oh, we can.
Oh, I gotta go find some escrow clauses and that stuff. I think I can find
tons of escrow clauses. I just negotiated one.
Yeah.
But our super attorney,
My interpretation is they believe the district is only acquiring ownership of data, the work product data, and not the underlying code. So I would recommend staff and one or both directors communicate with HAF, clarify our expectations and desires, see if it's viable, and see if it changes the amount of the proposal, and then bring it back if we can wait one meeting.
let's just create a
It'd be nice to get started. So, we're really at a place where the bulk of this is data. Most of those APIs are actually out of the box from Esri, so they're paying for the master development type stuff. The data itself then represents things like, what's the diameter of the pipe, and what's it made of, and where's it located. So that is our data and what they would be converting from a CAD-based set of data into something that's suitable for the Esri piece.
But I think the point he's talking about is that presentation there as it goes from that to the output device, what you're actually looking at, that's programming, this JavaScript.
But it's also potentially just out-of-the-box programming that when you have a Esri GIS layer and you're trying to view it on a handheld, that they have a interface program that just converts it for you. I don't think they're actually doing that program themselves.
No, it says they're developing the web maps with an API, which is a programming interface.
Director Chapman, if it turned out that they cannot give us the source code and they could only give us the data files, would you still want to proceed with the services for the maps and data files? Because if the answer is yes, then we can start the process with this, and if there's any additional cost for the code, we would bring that back. If you don't want the data and maps without the underlying code, then I would recommend we not go forward.
Okay. Well, my only point to the board is if we don't do this, and for some reason they go out of business or whatever, we have the data, supposedly, but it will be useless to us unless we get someone to rewrite or redo the interface. You know, we could end up with we got a great database, we just can't get to the data.
touch it, yeah.
But couldn't we just get an ARC software license?
But you get the license, they're custom coding some JavaScript code. It's like a programming language.
would just
JavaScript is
have
a
to-
programming language.
Yeah, we would just have to replicate that development work. Given the size of the project is $30,000, I mean, again, it's not gonna be, he has a valid point, but it's not likely to be,
That onerous.
yes, it's gonna be less than $30,000.
I would say we could go ahead with this, and if they can't provide the escrow, that's fine, but let's try and get it. Most companies don't, you know, if it's a drop in the bucket for them to create a backup tape of the JavaScript or the COBOL code or whatever
Sure.
kind of stuff. Should be part of their backup.
Yeah, if we can
because
do
that's
that,
recovery anyway.
If we can do that, I'm more than happy to chime Director
There's
Chapman
still
in on the
some
conference
need
call.
for COBOL out there, bigot. Jeez. God, I hate programming bigots. Anyway, I code COBOL on a regular basis.
But we're not gonna judge you.
You are a pain. Anyway,
Back to work here. Who's
Yeah.
got a motion?
I don't know how to, I don't know, I was gonna make a motion, but you're gonna have to make it now with all these 52 attachments and whatever.
oh, great. Put it
Amendment.
back to me. Okay, let me see, where is here?
Number 8.
I make a motion to approve the proposal to get a GIS database support and hosting from Half and Associates as part of the fiscal year 2019 capital outlays, with the caveat that they provide us with some idea of whether or not they can provide an escrow account for the JavaScript code that they're doing for us.
Not to exceed 36.
Not to exceed, sorry, not to exceed $36,000.
I think you wanna stipulate, if you put with the caveat, then it simply means if they can't do it, then it dies.
Oh.
If they don't meet your caveat. So you would have to say with the best effort.
With a,
or-
okay, amend that to say for the best effort to get us an escrow copy of the code.
Okay.
I'm new at this, give me a break.
That's okay. So we have a motion by Director Chapman to proceed with the proposal of GIS database support and hosting from Half and Associates as part of our FY 2019 capital budget, not to exceed $36,000, with a best effort to obtain a software escrow for any programming that they do customized for our implementation. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Secretary Treasurer Flynn. Are there any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor indicate by raising your hand. Motion passes unanimously.
That's what you get for letting
Well, they go-
software
they
geek
go
on the
techie.
board.
Yes.
An IT geek.
Rose is the good guy this meeting.
Doing it for 40
Okay.
years. Sorry, I get into
And
the
you're the
weeds.
ones in, not extending the meeting.
Yeah, just a bit.
Just a bit.
Okay.
Is that recorded?
Consider and take appropriate action to adopt order number 2019-0121, declaring the following operations vehicle to be surplus property of the district and authorizing staff to sell such surplus vehicles. A, truck number 101, a 2011 Ford F-150 extended cab pickup with 83,464 miles and that was purchased on November 8, 2011. B, van number 302, which is a 2001 GMC Camry van with 16,286 miles and 19,964 hours of use, which was purchased on June 30, 2001. And C, truck number 303, a 2009 International Gapback with 46,054 miles and 2,653 hours of use, which was purchased on August 4th, 2010. Staff? So,
I'll defer this one to Mr. McMahon.
Okay, these are all just trucks that, vehicles that were replaced or going to be replaced this year, so we just wanted to bring this to the board so we could take them to auction and declare them surplus. One of the things I do want to bring up is a 2001 Camry van, almost 20,000 miles on it. Divide that by 8-hour days and see how many days somebody sat behind that computer cammering sewer lines.
Any other comments or discussion? Vice President Rose?
Yeah, I'll come up to the camera van discussion. Oh, 20,000 hours of use. Yeah, we've had discussions about the camera van. It's been down for quite a while, so we put it in the budget. The technology is out of date significantly. I do have a question on the gap back.
Okay.
I know we bought a new one. My question about that particular vehicle is, is it in our best interest to sell it, or is it in our best interest to keep it, maybe use it a little bit in case we need two vac trucks sometime? Because we had that little issue with that one lift station, and we had to get additional help to come in, and I don't know whether 2 vac trucks would have been, and so I kind of look at that and say, well, is it still working? And if it's still working, how much effort does it take to keep it working? Are we better off to let it go now, or wait until the wheels fall clear off of it? That's
I think
question.
so. Usually on the Gap vacs, this is about, I don't know, at least probably the 4th Gap Vector truck that we've had since I've been here.
And you've been here how long?
Over 20 years.
Okay.
So
5
usually
years.
about 5 years is about the max on one of those trucks, just because there's so many moving parts. When they're ran out there, they're ran hard. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on there with those vehicles. This Gap Vax, we kept way over that. We have put quite a bit of money into this truck over the last couple of years. I would not think it would be in our best interest to keep this truck. I think if we had emergency like that, we have emergency contracts with people, with haulers. Ace Pipe Cleaning is one of them. We have Cheney that dumps the dumpsters at the wastewater
What's
plant.
the estimated, what do we think we're gonna get for it? Did I hear 20,000? Did somebody say, or did I not hear that?
I don't think we have any idea what we're gonna get for it.
Okay.
I don't know what we will.
But it would go out to auction, right?
It would go to auction.
And while it's drivable today, we've actually used it fairly recently. It's not to say it's entirely functional. I'm confident there are things on that machine that do not work.
There are safety issues that need to be addressed. If we were to ever keep it, there are things that need to be spent, I think, to get it to what we really need. And you also have the cost of insurance for the year, too.
It'll be a
that-
money pit, or if it's not
It's safe
already.
now. I was saying if we keep it, we're gonna be dumping more money into it than what we would spend on an emergency contract.
And so you're saying it's not cost effective?
But Director Rowe's question is a good one. What happens when it's down for repairs? One of the attractive features about our new one was that they have a fellow who will come out and do regular PM work on that on our side, as opposed to driving it all the way to wherever Waco or wherever the current one has a manufacturing facility. I want to say that they had a facility in Arlington.
I think it was in Arlington.
So that's the farthest we have to drive it to get repairs that have to go to their side.
Okay.
And then finally, so those were attractive features to buy this particular model. And then finally, we do have that, and I believe we got it approved, the ACE contract, emergency contract, so that if we need an extra truck, we can call them in. And we've got them on contracts.
That answers those questions. I would like to make one other comment. You sent me to the dictionary with this item, and go to bottom page 87, section 4. There's this word effectuate, and so I went to my dictionary, finally found it, went to the
Is it wrong?
no, and went to my thesaurus to see if what there's no other word for it. Congratulations. That's all I've got.
Carmen's
was
always
like-
got his words he's gonna come up with,
I may not have come up with that one.
I was going to use it in a motion earlier just to push it around a little bit, decided not to.
It shows up in official language. I bet Tony's responsible for that. That's
See
not
that,
me.
Tony?
I don't think I'm responsible for its use in this case, but it's used pretty often.
Yeah, it's the first time I'd seen it. It was like,
Really?
what's this?
$3 word.
It really is.
Okay,
Moving on.
moving on.
Do you have a motion that you can effectuate?
You bet. I move to approve order 2019-0121.
We have a motion by Vice President Rose to approve order number 2019-0121, declaring these vehicles surplus and authorizing staff to sell them as surplus vehicles.
I'll
That's
second.
effectuate.
It's been seconded by Director Castanway. Any other discussions? All right. Hearing none, all in favor indicate by raising your hand. Motion passes unanimously. Item number 10, I would like to table this item following our executive session. Is there any objections to that action?
No.
Okay. So pursuant to section 551-071 of the Texas Open Meeting Act, the board may consult with this attorney in executive session on a matter of which is the duty of the attorney of the governmental body under the disciplinary rules of professional conduct of the State Bar of Texas clearly conflicts with the Open Meeting Act, or to seek advice of counsel on legal matters involving pending or contemplated litigation or settlement offers. A, contractor breach, performance and payment issues related to district contract with Weber Cadagua Partners for construction of the wastewater treatment plant improvements. And B, Trophy Club Municipal Utility District 1 versus Arcadia Services LLC in the District Court of Tarrant County, 141st District Court, cause number 141-299-351-18. C, claims for damages caused by district facilities and or operations to property located at 1040 Trophy Club Drive, Trophy Club, Texas. And D, consultation with legal counsel regarding annexation and exclusion of lands from district boundaries.
Hey, Greg, so you're entering in the executive session, is that what you're proposing here?
Yes.
Okay, we're not gonna do 10 and 11 before that,
We'll
or
come
not?
back to them.
We'll come back to
'em?
it.
I knew you were coming back to one of them. I
Yeah,
didn't-
we
You gonna come back to all of them? Okay.
Yeah.
Fine.
Okay, we will enter executive session at 8:03.
I mean, I know you've been waiting for the stellar financial.
It is now 9:25. We're returning to regular session. No decision, votes, or were made while in executive session. We will go back to item number 10. And apparently Bill Rose took my, oh, here it is. I stand corrected. Comment withdrawn. Consider and take appropriate action regarding the adoption of resolutions requesting appraisal of property and certificate of estimated appraised values from Tarrant County and Denton County. Would anyone happen to have a motion?
I do. I move to approve resolution 20-19-012A and B, which request appraisal of property and certificate estimated appraisal values from both Tarrant County and Denton County.
We have a motion by Vice President Rose to approve resolution number 2019-0121A and B, requesting appraisal of property and certificate estimated appraised value for Tarrant and Denton County. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Director Chapman. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor indicate by raising your hand. Motion passes unanimously. Item number 11, consider and take appropriate action regarding the December 2018 combined financials and variance reports. A, combined financials. B, combined variance.
I know this is the moment you've all been waiting for.
You've been waiting with bated breath.
I
to
know you
hear
have.
this.
I wish I had more to deliver. However, it's early in the year, obviously. You look at revenues so far, obviously, we're down a little bit on the water side, not surprising, right? Since we're in December and January. But the good news is our expenses overall, if I'm reading them correctly, are about 16% for fiscal year to date. And revenues are not, trailing that just a little bit. So all in all, pretty good, but I did, Stephen, have a question. On the check register, there is Weber Cadabwa for $24,000. Is that the pipeline? Is that the 16? And what's the?
It's a wastewater
That was
plant.
in December, check register.
That's
Wastewater,
That's gonna be the
okay.
wastewater improvements.
Then
I
there
was
was
about to say, what are they
CPNY for 12,000.
Engineering,
It-
and I'm not sure which we have multiple projects going on with CP&Y.
This one says Wallace. Is that
It's
narrow
gonna
it
be-
down any or no?
That's
I
probably
can
it.
pull up
Yeah.
the check and see.
Okay, just curious. So, yeah, those are the only two questions I had.
Any other questions?
I want to go ahead and make a comment if I can. Here on the cash report, I just want to kind of let everybody kind of see what we've got here. On the cash report, if you guys did look through it and see, you will see cash escrow on there for $361,000. That is the purchase of the GATVAC truck. We did purchase that here. Check went out here in December, but it is been purchased through the escrow account. So there's a remaining roughly about $3,000 left in there. We paid 258. Sorry, we paid 358, 600, I think it is roughly. Some rounding in there. So there's about 3,000 left in there. I reached out to him this month about closing that account now that we don't need the escrow out there, and apply what's remaining in the escrow from interest and everything towards our interest payment we're about to make here and this next month. So this next cash report, that should be gone, and we're going to clean that back out to use it as our payment, part of our payment for interest. Yes.
I have a request. If you look at page 147, it says tax bond construction balance sheet. Every time I look at one of these tax bond balance sheets, I have to struggle to recall what they're associated with. Would it be possible to get something up there in the top in plain language, a descriptor of what the associated project is?
Sure.
I-
Yeah, I mean, this is all the wastewater treatment plant.
Yeah, but it's
That's
like,
what, I mean, that's what it's called. That's what our bond is called on there.
but if you could just put
yeah.
wastewater,
Okay.
wastewater plant or something like, so, some idea. On the variance report, page 175, we've got dues and membership, board annual membership dues.
Mhm.
Is that strictly AWBD or are there other dues in there?
That was for AWBD.
AWBD, okay. And on page 176, this is, I think that's administration, TRWA dues. How many, that covers several employees, or exactly what does that cover? TRWA,
That's the dues and membership for,
URWA.
yeah.
Texas Rural Water Association.
okay,
Yeah, it's just a due. We do it once a year.
okay,
annually.
but that covers,
It's an
that covers
organization.
organization or is it employees?
I think it's organization.
Yeah, it's all
Okay.
of us. Ours is.
Okay, that's all I've got. Thank you.
Any other discussion? I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move to approve the December 2018 combined financials and variance report, A, combined financials, and B, combined variance report.
Second.
We have a motion by Secretary Treasurer Flynn to approve the December 2018 combined financial and variance report, seconded by Vice President Rose. Any other questions, discussions? Hearing none, all in favor indicate by raising your hand. Motion passes unanimously. Okay, item number 12, General Manager Monthly Reports and Updates, A through F.
Mr. President, my computer picked this moment to update itself, and I'm still struggling to get back to an agenda. Included in your packet is a fairly abbreviated general manager's report. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have, or to attempt to answer any questions you might have.
The only question I had on the GM's report was actually out of the fire chief's report. And I was just wondering where he talked about, I think it was 3 employees departing to go someplace else. If they left specific reasons that they might be able to discuss, whether we're talking about the new locations just closer home for me, or are we talking about salary differentials that would create something that we need to look into?
Where do you see that?
It's down in the GM's report.
I see fire department summary,
Yeah,
but I didn't see.
179. Let me get back up there. I highlighted it.
Two firefighters departing.
Yeah, it's the 179. During the month of November, December, the department lost 2 firefighters to other departments.
Okay.
To other departments.
Yeah, other departments. And it was like they go to the police department or they go to,
A different city or town.
yeah, exactly. And so
Well, if it says to other, yeah,
I thought other departments,
Departments.
other cities or
that would
towns.
be my guess. I doubt they
Yeah.
became.
Yes,
Yeah.
not internal.
But but if there's a cost basis,
Yeah,
I
they-
mean, if there's,
They
yeah,
went over to the water plant since.
Kinda doubt that.
okay. I just wondered if it was,
Our
Mike-
recliners aren't soft enough down there in our break room for that.
We will note that the next time they're in.
you can tell also, when you look at the pumped reports on pumped versus build on, hello, what page am I on here? 180? We're scooting along the bottom.
Yes,
It's wet again.
we're
so-
way low.
I know it's not in here, probably because it happened after you prepared the report and that stuff, but I happened to see our truck in action at Durango and Village Trail. Right there. Was that the vac truck?
Yes.
Okay.
It's nice and shiny.
Nice and shiny, and they also parked it where you have to took a real go around left, because they took 2 trucks and parked them side by side practically. But I just, oh, okay, there's our stuff, there's our guys working hard.
I think it was in your report, talked about, broke a saddle on a 10-inch main.
That's my understanding.
It was a 6-inch main.
It was a 6-inch?
I think it just said the saddle.
I think I just said saddle in the report.
I might have picked up the 10-inch off of something else. Have any idea how much water we lost, or did it just start leaking a little bit?
It was a saddle, so it's not as much as a main break, but probably somewhere in the vicinity of around 30,000 gallons.
Okay. I don't have anything else.
Okay. Anyone else with anything for staff? Nothing. Let's see, item number 16, items for future agendas. Okay, next item, next regular board meeting, February 18th at 6:30. If there's nothing else, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I just say, I motion to adjourn. I already made a second.
We have a motion to adjourn. Meeting is now adjourned at 9:35 p.m. and you can't bring anything up because there's nothing left to talk about.